it made me realize that when people were writing the Psalms, the fear, it's not just, it was also so real. It was, you know, and that being in that situation where you don't know if you're going to make it through the day is, you know, if you've ever been in that situation where I have been, you just don't, you know, it's terrifying.
So those two Psalms that we did at the end outside of the big read, well, we did 13, 121, and 130 are classic Psalms for moments of fear or crisis. So that's why I tacked them on. I wanted to do some that were just showing how do you just read the whole book. Dave Yadid told me his classmates from JTS yesterday got on a Zoom together and just read Psalms, exactly what we did, just started at 1 and they just went as far, I don't know how far they went. But so those three you should know about and look at. 13, 121, and then especially 130 are really Psalms of moments of crisis and of fear and deep anxiety. I mean, they're all good, as you know. But I'm just.
So we are at 10 o'clock. I see there's still some hands up. You can put your comments into chat.
Yes, please.
And I believe that Adria is playing us in today. Adria, is that correct? And if in any case, you unmute
That's
yourself.
correct, Harold.
All right. What do you got?
It was slightly challenging to figure out what would be appropriate for this morning, and I decided to go back to something I believe I played before, which is again Bach. I always seem to be drawn to Bach. Um, Kind of to help me process what our world and our country went through yesterday as a culmination of what we've been dealing with for what I believe more than the 4 years that we've just gone through. Um, this is a Bach Saraband. It is unusual in that if you remember when I played it last time, it just used single notes. It has no chords. It has no motion where the instrumentalist has to go across, sweep the bow across the strings, something like that. It's just very simple, plaintive melody, and yet you can hear multiple voices in it. Bach was an organist, but he also was a string player, and somehow he managed magically to transfer everything that one could do, almost everything that one could do on an organ with the foot pedals and multiple keyboards, into an instrument that has 4 strings and a bow. And that's it. I have no foot pedals, I have no extra keyboards or anything here. And this Saraband is acknowledged to be a combination of the most desolate and the most lonely sounding movement probably that Bach ever wrote for a solo instrument.
just perfection. Perfection. I want to say something about both the Psalms last night and Bach and music and Psalms. You know, and I hope that you're getting this in our studying together. There are multiple levels to access the power of something as deep as Psalms, like something as deep as Bach. There is the John Ashbery's question, you know, how does a poem mean? How does a psalm mean what it means? You know, learning the Hebrew, picking apart the grammar, understanding context, being able to say, I see what the psalmist is doing, and that makes it more meaningful because you can understand how it means what it means. What makes the words powerful? What does it mean? How does it get there? All of that is very crucial and one way to approach the Psalms. The other way is to let it all happen to us. Do you know what I mean? Let it all, it's not intellectual anymore. It goes beyond the intellectual and it's spiritual, it's emotional, it's physical. And that's what the chanting of Psalms can do, can be that kind of rhythm. And I think the same thing, and that's what I meant when I talked about my encountering and trying to understand and relate to classical music only when I was an adult. I felt something, but I didn't understand it. So Adria and Ira and Simon and Jack Neiman and others of our musician types in this class can explain to those of us who are not musicians and understand things that Adria can understand things about Bach that she can't explain to me because I don't have the framework to begin to understand them. But when she plays Bach, I have a relationship to it that's not intellectual, right? And I can't explain what Bach is doing, or Beethoven, or Mozart, the way that those of you who are musicians can. But I can sure experience it. I can feel it. It goes beyond that. And just like what makes a great musician, if a musician can only explain to you that Bach doing this, and this is what's clever and smart and brilliant, but doesn't translate it in the playing of it, you know, there's going to be some emptiness there. It's going to be technical, but it's not going to be musical or spiritual in that way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Can I say something, Rabbi?
Sure, Adria. Of course you can.
I think that the relationship here that's very powerful is that for me, in studying Psalms in this group, is a much different experience than reading them on my own. And the power of the teaching and from you and from everyone in this class with their personal Psalms and their comments in the chat and the conversations that go on offline, it takes it to a level that's not possible for me when I sit with my books, piled up here on my desk and read a psalm. And it's the same thing, I think, the collective experience of listening to music together has an incredible power. The visceral experience of it. You can sense the energy of people in the room, and even the faces on the screen. And even though you don't have the intellectual understanding of the music theory, or how a note will clash and then resolve, or it's in this style, or the French overture style, or the whatever style, the bagels and lox style, whatever you want to call it. I think this whole experience is just so extraordinary because we are all doing this together. And my intellectual understanding of liturgical Hebrew, or even the Psalms in English, is, one notch above pitiful, really. So there's so much in the collective experience of sharing the Psalms and listening to music and being together doing this.
Brilliantly said and beautifully said, Adria. Judaism does not believe in studying on your own. Isn't that interesting? Judaism does not generally, and there are all different reasons for it, but that's why the Chavruta model, I think, is so deep, that Judaism doesn't believe. Obviously, Judaism says it's good if you sit and study by yourself to learn something, but it's not the ideal form of study, just like the ideal form of prayer is not praying alone in Judaism. The ideal form of prayer for Jews is in community. The ideal form of study is with somebody else. That there's something that's at that core of what you're saying, Adria, that's so deep. And I get that we're kind of in our, how many people are here today? 84 screens are here today, and I know some screens have multiple people on them. We're here today as a big group, but I think what you're saying goes down to that idea that there's a very famous Mishnah, by the way, that it says some things should only be thought of alone. In other words, you shouldn't say some things even if you know them to be true. Some things should only be studied in groups of two, and some things can be studied in big groups. It's very interesting, but that's why I'm slowly trying to develop the concept of chavruta with everyone, and then maybe we'll even take it another step further. But really studying with somebody else helps a lot. There's an isolation to picking up a book alone that actually isn't Jewish. Although, of course, any study is good, especially at the level of, beginners and advanced beginners. Studying alone is hard.
So
To take the
Rabbi,
idea. Let's take a couple of comments and then let's take the two comments and then we'll
okay,
go to Psalm 15.
Lori and then Sherry.
You mean me?
Lori, yes,
Yes,
Lori
Lori.
Krotman.
Oh, okay.
Lori, how do you pronounce your last name?
Krotman.
Krotman. Okay, thank you.
Wasn't my
And folks, you should always correct me or Harold if we're not pronouncing your names correctly. Please let us know. Okay.
God is above the above.
Yeah. I didn't really have a question so much
Sure,
as
that's fine.
as a comment on last night. I had the news behind me while Sam and Joyce were singing the Psalms, and it felt like an epic movie to me. It felt like, this is how big things happen, and the peace of the singing contrasted to the chaos of what was going on. It was so soothing, and it gave like a really big historical picture of what's happening.
Beautiful.
And now Sherry or Simon.
Yeah, just to build on the idea of prayer being done by oneself or in a group. I think I would venture to say most musicians would say that there's something additionally satisfying or especially satisfying in playing or singing together rather than just by oneself. And there's something special that happens when you do that, with other people. I think the analogy is very close.
That's beautiful.
So
So I also have the question, Adria, what was the piece you just played? Can you
I
maybe
put it in the chat a few
put it in
times.
the chat?
It's the
Great.
cello. It's one of the Bach cello suites. It's the fifth suite, which is and the key is C minor. So if you Google Bach cello suite number 5, it'll come up in various recordings. And it's unique because Bach asked the cello to tune the strings out of the normal tuning, to give the
that's
instrument
amazing.
a more particular resonance, and to make, because of the placement of the fingers for the chords. And that the term for that, it's a beautiful term. It's called scordatura, which means that you tune out of the normal tuning. The opening of this work is a gigantic prelude and fugue, such that Bach would have written for organ, and it's filled with multiple. It has this huge opening that sounds like this. I mean, it's kind of gigantic. And then you have in the midst of this suite where all the movements are very, very complicated with many combinations of chords and everything, this saraband. It's the only saraband in the 6 suites that Bach wrote that doesn't have a single note where you join it with another note. They're all single notes. And yet you can hear the multiple voices in it, like a choir singing.
Amazing.
Like almost like plain chant, but with extra bass notes in there.
Wow.
And I believe that this really does come, everything comes from Bach as an organist, but the fact that he was able to take that sound in his head and transfer it to 4 strings is just extraordinary.
Wow.
To me.
Great.
Well, I hope
All
you
right,
all know that at the end of this class, not only are you getting a doctorate in psalmology, you're going to be getting a master's in music appreciation after the 2 years of study. So Rabbi,
Okay, Psalm 15.
so here's my question. I have the text. I know there were so many questions that came up yesterday in Chavruta. Do you want to start with,
No, now we go to the text.
okay, we're gonna
Make those
jump right
questions.
in. We're gonna jump right in.
So hopefully your questions are now sharper and we're going to look at stuff and there are even more problems and questions. So let me start by saying, so Psalm 15 is one of the short ones. It's not the shortest, it's 5 verses. 2, as I mentioned, is the very shortest. There's only one that's 2 verses. But there are a bunch in this 4, 5, 6, 7 category. It's a very nice size, I think, because you can really hold the whole thing and see the architecture of it, I think, kind of easily. This psalm is often done in funerals. And as I've said, and I know Randy is working on thinking about this, there are big categories for themes of psalms. It's not official. When I say that there are different kinds of psalms, it doesn't mean that there's this official list that's somewhere and everything fits in neatly. Because remember, the book of Psalms wasn't written officially as a book when it was written. There were all of these psalms. They were collected into one place. There are discussions about whether or not there is a overarching development between the 150 Psalms. I do not believe so. I think it's more like an anthology of poetry, a collection of poems. They don't necessarily relate one to the one which immediately came before or the one that immediately comes after, but sometimes they sure seem to. And so the big categories of psalm, we have psalms that are historical, that talk about historical things that have happened. We have psalms that we call psalms of lamentation or despair that are in the first person typically, and they express one's personal sense of despair and hopelessness and fear. There are psalms of exaltation or psalms of praise, that psalms that sing of the glory of the universe and the beauty of the natural world, like the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat. And then there are psalms of, we call them wisdom psalms, that are psalms that teach us something. Psalm 1 was a classical wisdom psalm, Mi Ha'ish. Who is the person? If we remember back to Psalm 1, which begins, Ashrei Ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzat resha'im u'v'derech hata'im lo amad u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Happy is the person who does X, Y, and Z. Happy is the person who doesn't do X, Y, and Z. So that's considered a wisdom psalm. In the ancient Near East, there is a whole body of literature, not only Jewish Bible, but in every one of the ancient Near Eastern bodies of literature that we have. And by ancient Near East languages, I mean those languages found in this period of time and a little bit earlier in the ancient Near East. They're called, in scholarship, you'll see ANE all the time, ancient Near East. That's a category of cultures, of languages, of religions. And somebody typically who's a scholar in one of the ancient Near Eastern cultures has to become somewhat fluent in the others, because the only way we understand language is to compare the words. So there are these languages that are from this time and literature from this time. So Ugaritic is one of those languages, and in Ugaritic there's a big body of, not big because we don't have that many, but a significant body of literature called wisdom literature. It exists in all of these different Coptic and other languages of the time. And Akkadian is another language, Akkadian. And these languages all are part of the ancient Near East. They all have these pieces called wisdom literature. In Judaism, we also have the book of Proverbs, would be considered a classic example of wisdom literature. What's Proverbs? It's a bunch of proverbs. What's the word proverb? Do this, don't do that, so Proverbs are considered wisdom literature. The book of Psalms as a book is not a book of wisdom literature, but because it has all these different types of Psalms. But inside the book of Psalms, there are some Psalms which we characterize as Psalms that represent this wisdom literature. So Psalm 15 is one of these psalms that we see as part of the wisdom literature. It's not a psalm of despair or lamentation. It's not a psalm of praise or exaltation. and it's not a historical psalm. So those are the huge categories. In those categories, there are, of course, many subcategories. And some psalms have a little bit of several of those. It's not all so neat and box-like. You know what I mean? You can't all fit it in. Once I give you the rule, obviously, it doesn't. These are generalizations to have in your mind as we approach a psalm. And then there are psalms of deep comfort. They're comfort psalms, psalms of comfort. Okay, so this is a psalm. As I said, it's often done at funerals, and it is a wisdom psalm. So that it is aspirational. And as we go through it, like Psalm 1, it's helping somebody who wants to know, which is what the definition of a wisdom psalm is. If I want to live a good life, what do I need to focus on? And in the case of this psalm, I do believe it relates to the psalm immediately before, and maybe even the two immediately before, Psalm 13 and 14, which describe evil over and over again quite explicitly. And honestly, I think all of us, I don't want to speak if you didn't, many of us could certainly relate to these descriptions of evil. Some of us saw that it can exist altogether in any one of us. Some of us saw what's going on. But in the Psalms 13 and 14, and you can go back and look at them, especially 14, we see lots of descriptions of how does somebody behave that makes them not full of holiness and not going on a righteous path. Psalm 15 describes for us what it would look like if somebody were on a righteous path. It doesn't mean that perfection, that Judaism does not believe anybody can achieve perfect behavior all the time, but it does believe that we hold in front of us aspirationally what a righteous life would look like. So Mizmor LeDavid, it starts very simply with a opening that we're very familiar with. No reference here to a lamanatseach, to a musical instrument, which of course does not mean that musical instruments were not used. Remember, silence doesn't mean that therefore this one was not sung or put to music or had musical accompaniment. It just means and we don't know why some psalms have it and some psalms don't. But don't think that if it's not there, it's an argument that it didn't have a setting that was either sung or otherwise. Mizmor LeDavid. Yud and then period. See how the English does this in period. Yud He Vav He, starting right away. This is a significant opening, that Yud He Vav He is the first word of the body of the text of the psalm. The most powerful name for God, the name of infinity, the name of eternal, the name of eternity, the name of limitlessness. Yud He Vav He. Mi yagor beholecha, umi yishkon behar kodshecha. This is classical biblical parallelism. So if we were to chop off Mizmor LeDavid, as this translator does by having a period, and then looked at the two phrases that in this translation are separated by a comma, Yud He Vav He should stand alone, as it does here with the comma. Then there are two phrases, who may sojourn in your tent, comma, who may dwell on your holy mountain. So you could see the parallel. Mi yagur, who will sojourn? It's the word from the Shoresh Gimel Vav Resh or Gimel Yud Resh. We're not really, there's arguments for both, but it doesn't matter. It's from the same Shoresh that we have like for a ger, who is a stranger or a wanderer, somebody who wanders or who wanders too. So, but me, who will be able to make it to, in other words, find or get to or sojourn, stay there. Be, this be is the bet is a prefix. I hope everybody in the class who's been in the Aleph class can recognize the bet. Does everybody recognize the bet? Be means in. Ohel, Aleph, Hey, Lamed is the Shoresh. An Ohel is a tent. And the Chaf at the end of the word is a shortening of the suffix Shelcha, of yours. So in one Hebrew word, we have the English words, in your tent. So those 3 English words are in the one Hebrew word. So who will arrive? Who will sojourn? Who can stay in your tent? Second phrase, which is absolute parallel. Me, who, again, the repetition of the word who, exact repetition. Yishkon. Yishkon is, the shoresh is shin, chaf, nun. It's the same shoresh for the word mishkan, which is a place where God lives. Shechina, the one of the names of God, is from this, and it also is a very simple word for neighbor or neighborhood. A shechuna, it's neighborhood or a place, but in Hebrew it has because of the sense of God's presence. Mi yishkon, who will live, who will dwell, who will stay, who will live. So parallel. So yishkon is parallel to yagor, and biholecha, in your tent, is parallel to behar kodshecha. Bahar, in your har, is a hill or a mountain, and everybody in Aleph class recognize the letter bet there again. The bet in biholecha parallels the bet in behar kodshecha. Does everybody see that? That bet means in. It also has a rhythm, obviously, to the ear, to hearing what it sounds like. And then who will live bi in the mountain har, in the mountain kodshecha, of your holy mountain. So I want everybody to see this structure, because this is a classic, clean, easy example of biblical parallelism. This is as good as it gets to have very, very clear, where every word is parallel to another word. And the 2 phrases, what's the relationship between phrase 1, thank you, Harold, mi yagor b'holecha, and mi yishkon behar kodshecha. See, those are 2 absolute parallel. Yud, God's name is kind of attached to both, just the way that big comma has it. You see that big comma in the Hebrew after Lord? So, mi yagor b'holecha, mi yishkon behar kodshecha. These are 2 questions in some ways. Who may sojourn and who may dwell? What are the differences and what are the similarities? Remember, in biblical parallelism, there are basically 3 ways that biblical parallelism appears. The second phrase can intensify the first phrase in some way. The second phrase can be an opposite, can be some kind of antithesis of the first phrase. Or the second phrase can use different words to try and emphasize something about the first. So it's very similar, but using different languages to deepen it. So the ohalecha could mean the ohel moed, could mean the actual tent of meeting. It's called that was in the desert, right? So it could be very concrete. And yishkon behar kodshecha could mean quite literally. Har kodshecha could literally mean Har HaMoriah or Har Tzion, the mountain that became the Temple Mount. So one that it could refer back. The other thing is that ohel is as a tent is something that is human created. Har kodshecha, a holy mountain, is something that is God's creation. So it's something from the natural world. That's another difference we could see between the 2. Ohalecha could be anywhere. We can create it. We can create an ohel anywhere. And Har Kodshecha is some kind of holy mountain that might be outside of our creative ability. Okay, so I want to stop there and just ask if there are questions or thoughts about this verse. Are there? I haven't been watching. Okay.
Dr. Bar-Chava has been sharing some very interesting observations. Dr. Bar-Chava, would you like to speak?
Oh, and we didn't read it through in Hebrew. I want to do that. Maybe we'll do that on Monday. Okay, sorry. Yes.
One thing I'm seeing, the word oholecha, your tent. A tent is a very impermanent kind of dwelling, whereas a har, a mountain, is very permanent. So that's one contrast that I'm seeing.
Excellent. Beautiful. That's exactly the kind of thing you want to look for. Why are they using these 2? What do we get that's a little bit different?
Antar governance.
Beautiful.
and you shared something about Yagor and Yishkon. Well, I will read it. Anne Targovnik says, I think there's a meaningful contrast between sojourn, traveling, wandering, moving on a path, and the dwell, which implies a more permanent setting. Perhaps the difference between our journey in life and our resting in peace after death.
Beautiful.
Sarah Hirschhahn says, I was thinking of our time as a people in the desert when we dwelled in tents. And then Sarah Siegel says the Holy Mountain could be the Mount of Olives, where some Jews wish to be buried. Again, burial. And then, let's see. And then I have an interesting question from Lori Spear. Why is the Ha, why is it attached to holy rather than mountain? Why is it Behar Kodeshecha rather than Beharcha Kodesh?
So that's an excellent question. Hebrew has a grammatical form called smichut, which is, I forgot how they translate that into English, which is when two nouns are put together. Construct. Thank you, Cantor Nimi. Yes, Cantor Nimi. Thank construct. So if you were to put two nouns together, where in English we would also say the mountain of holiness, for instance. We don't really say, we would only put the holy mountain, we would say holy mountain, but they would say, because of smichut, we are putting these two nouns together, har and kodesh, to mean holy mountain, or holiness, mountain of holiness. And the second word is the word that is constructed or declined, a little bit like the word attorney generals in English. We don't say attorneys general. We say we say attorneys general.
We say attorneys general.
We say attorneys general and not attorney generals because of what is actually being constructed in the word itself. I didn't explain that well, but it's because of smichut, because of the biblical form.
And then Cantor Nimi,
whose grammar is better than mine, can explain it.
Cantor Nimi also referred back to other places where we say har kodesho. Cantor?
I just recall, I think it was in Psalm 3 actually, that we had that, because there was that verse that I used in a musical setting that I wrote, that when I called out to God, Vaya'aneni mehar kodesho, the mountain of God's holiness is the place from which God answers us.
Beautiful. And there's another, yes, and there's another sentence in Psalm 24. Mi ya'aleh bahar yud vavhe. Who can go up to God's mountain? Umi yakum bimkom kodsho. And who could stand in God's holy place? So that's a very similar. So all right, if are there others, Harold, for folks too?
Let me see, am I seeing any hands? I'm not seeing any.
Hands up?
Hands up.
So,
Lisa Brown has her hand up.
Mm-hmm.
So I like
the show. That's on verse 5 in Psalm 3.
I like the parallelism because it makes me feel, it's very comforting, it makes me feel that if you get to visit with God, that there's a permanence to that and that you don't sort of come and go. And there's other places where you do come and go. But here it's sort of expressing, if you've really gotten to visit with God, that you're sort of home. Very comforting.
Shep has his hand up.
Yeah, Rabbi, I was wondering that the word to dwell, yishkan,
yeah.
Is that related to yeshuv? Like
no.
Not really. They look alike a little bit, but not.
Yeah,
okay.
They look like little. It's related to the word mishkan, which is the holy. The mishkan is the noun of that form of one of the words for it, and it's related to Shekhinah, what we call God's feminine version, or as we said, Shechuna for a neighborhood or a neighbor. It has to do with somebody who lives someplace or dwells someplace. There are a lot of words that use this shoresh. Which I can't think of others right now, but there are a lot of them.
Ira has his hand up.
Yeah, hi. Just the use of the word ohel and mishkan really reminded me very much of the first line of Matovu, Ohalecha
Excellent.
ve'achol mishkanotecha Yisrael.
Excellent. Because I think that they contain all of these contrasts and complementary aspects. Beautiful, Ira. Exactly.
And Jack Neiman.
And I think it has the same power there as well, by the way. The one is, good. I'm sorry, Jack.
My question, is there any relationship between Mishkan and Hamakom?
Grammatically, no, but they refer to similar things, but they're totally different shorashim. The similarity in grammar, and I think I mentioned this at one point in our many months of studying together, is there something in biblical grammar, and actually it's true in modern Hebrew too, but they don't use this in modern Hebrew, but it's one of my favorite phrases. It's called the locative mem. The locative mem. Locative meaning from location. So there are a whole group of nouns, of shorashim, of roots in Hebrew. Then when you add the locative mem, it creates a location out of that noun, out of that. So there are a lot of Hebrew words. Mishkan, mitbach, makom. That the mem is not part of the shoresh. But the mem, as I just love that. Isn't that the craziest phrase? Locative mem. And I'm sure Yael and Ben can quickly come up with, there are a lot of Hebrew words nouns that start with mem, and most of them have something to do with place or location. Makom, mishkan. It can't be a word like mazal where the mem is part of the shoresh. It has to be a mem plus the shoresh creates a new, and so makom and mishkan are both the same grammatical form, that they've taken the shoresh, put on a mem, and created a noun that has something to do with place. How bizarre and random is that as a grammatical rule?
Is Beit Midrash one of those?
Midrash would be one of those.
All right.
There are a bunch of others in modern Hebrew too, but I can't think of them right now, of course.
What about midbar?
Midbar, great example.
All right. Sarah Siegel had her hand
That's
up.
another good example. Thank you, Shep. See, we're doing this. That's a locative mem on the shoresh daled bet resh.
Wow. Sarah Siegel.
Throw that around at a cocktail party.
Yes.
Have you met my locative mem?
Oh, Sarah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just, it's as usual trying to stretch the Hebrew to my own devices. I really like the idea of translating mi yagur and mi yishkon as who will be a stranger and who will be a neighbor.
Interesting. Great. A ger toshav is what we call a resident wanderer. So very interesting. So I'm glad you're seeing this. By looking at the parallelism, you start to ask questions. Okay, what is the poet, the psalmist, helping us see that's a little bit different? They're both places, an Ohel and a Har Kodesh, but they're different. And what are the differences? What do we get from it? It's not that one is good, one is bad. That's not what this is doing. It's not that one is the antithesis of the other. That's not what it's doing. It's giving us some deeper meaning. Throughout the ancient Near East, and ancient Jewish religion is no different, there are certain places, and we talked about this, maybe it was at Psalm 3, Cantor Nimi, when we were discussing that verse. There are certain things in nature that have particular holiness, and it's honestly, it's not true just only for ancient Near East, it's true in Native American culture too. Mountains have particular powers of holiness. So you see throughout cultures, whether it's in Tibetan Buddhism or in ancient Near Eastern Israelite Bible religion, mountains are very powerful. Think about it. In the ancient Near East, climbing up a mountain was the highest point you would ever get to as a human being, right? There was no other way. There was nothing you could do to get higher than a mountain. Imagine, that's what people describe. If you read what people were, for the first people who walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, in the late 1880s and 1890s, the Brooklyn Bridge was higher than anything else built by a human being at that time in North America. So to walk on the Brooklyn Bridge meant you could see things that were above any building that was in lower Manhattan at the time. So mountains in the ancient world had tremendous power. Holiness was very much attached, just a mountain itself. And throughout the Bible, there are two basic places where we find in the natural world a constant reflection of God's holiness. One is in mountains, and the other is in wells, or in places of depth from which you get water. One is deep in the earth, and one is high above. And both of those are places, and I understand it. That makes a lot of sense to me, that we see God in that sense of the height of the majesty of a mountain. And sometimes that's reflected in our story, that where did we receive the Torah? We didn't receive the Torah just walking along a road somewhere. By being on top of a mountain, Mount Sinai becomes the place where revelation takes place. That's great and deep holiness. Where is the temple built? It's built on a mountain. And of course, there were defense issues as well for the building of the temple. But still, there's something powerful about the height and majesty in the natural world of a mountain. And likewise, there's power in going deep to get nourishing water. And that's true for all of us as human beings. There are peak experiences. There are moments of transformation that we, literally the word peak is used. Isn't that great? Peak, P-E-A-K, not P-E-E-K. Peak experiences that are full of the grandeur of a Mount Sinai. And then there are these moments where we have to dig really deep to find some nourishing water to help us survive. And not as visible, not as dramatic, but profound and holy. So to have here the reference to Har Kodshecha, your holy mountain, is a sense of you can experience God's presence there. And I like very much what Yael said about Ohel. So that it's impermanent. We don't just have to worry about creating things that will last forever. Sometimes we just have to create things that are impermanent and transient and ephemeral. But if they're filled with holiness, that's so powerful. Sometimes we think we have to make sure something's so perfect that it will last forever, or that something, and there's a place for that, but guess what? Mostly that's the natural world. It's not going to be human built. Nothing human built, I think this psalm is telling us, is going to last forever. But what we can do is we could build a tent that's full of holiness, that it might blow away and it certainly won't last forever, but we can experience God's presence in that. And going back to the music we talked about, a great performance is a very ephemeral thing. When I read what's his name? Benjamin Britten's biography. Do you know he was opposed to his music being recorded? Because, recordings were just becoming very popular then. Because he believed people should have to work harder to come and listen to it. He didn't want people to put a record on of his music and cook dinner. Like, he felt like, I worked very hard to write this music. The musicians and singers have worked very hard to perform it. I don't want you putting it on as background music in your house. I want you to have to buy a ticket, go somewhere, sit and focus on this music. I just love that idea. But anyway, little did he know what would happen to music on the internet, huh? Anyway, but there's something about, I think he has a point, that there's something about the impermanence of a musical performance that can't be captured unless you're there in the room, when those musicians, or if you're a musician, it's so ephemeral. Or theater is like that too, right? You've been at a great performance. Wow, 2.5 hours, 2 hours, it's over, it's gone, right? But so I think this first line of the psalm is saying, it's not about how long or how permanent something is. It's about how much holiness gets created in any given moment. And that is, I think the psalm is telling us, that's all in our hands.
Rabbi, looking at the time, I think we're ready for some more holiness created by Adria Benjamin.
And I think, does Adria want to speak? She can say something.
I just want to say that what we experienced last night is exactly what you just ended with, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Of bringing everybody together for the reading of the Psalms, and so that we could take care of each other.
Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful.
In the horror that we all experienced, I guess. Harold, should I go ahead?
Yes, it's all
Yep.
you.
And we'll
Okay.
continue with Psalm 15 on Monday. We got really
Okay,
far
so-
today, right? One verse.
One verse.
Sorry.
One verse.
Okay. So this is the Saraband again.
Thank you, Adria. Just so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yours is, and others in the class, the only live music I get to hear. So thank you so much.
Thank
Jack
you.
played his piano for us
I know. I said, and others in the class.
and others in the class.
Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you so much. An early Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Tomorrow, Rabbi, we have a zone egg. Is that correct?
We have a zone egg. Harold says I should copyright that because everybody's gonna. I should get all the royalties. Yes, we're having a zone egg after services tomorrow night for people to leave Facebook and then come on a zone egg. And Billy Planer from Atlanta is going to talk about the significance of the Georgia election, because let's not lose that this week, right? What it
Right.
means as Jews, as African Americans, as Jews of color, and just to really think about the significance. And you'll learn more about him tomorrow night if you don't know him. If you came on our trips to the South, he was our guide, and it was his organization that we went with. So that'll be at 8:30 tomorrow night.
Thank you. And Ben Shaffrin, if we could just ask you to check your chat and your email. We're waiting for your Psalm 14, Annika and I, so that we can then send out the collection to everybody.
I sent it to you yesterday.
I didn't get it. You must have the wrong email for one or both of us. because
Okay.
neither of
Okay,
us get
so
your-
the room is
but
going to
anyway,
stay
we'll
open
work
for
this out with
5 minutes, folks. The room will stay open for 5 minutes. Love to all. Let's hope for a boring day.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Okay, boring is good. All right. Ben?
Yeah.
It's HSLEVINE@gmail.com.
I put it on the reply to the email you sent me.
I know, but for some reason I'm not getting, let me check again. Neither of us is getting your emails.
Even a reply to your own?
Check your spam.
Yeah, but
And I also sent you something from Psalm Offerings during class. So please check your email, and if you respond to that,
right,
I'll,
because I'm checking everything, Ben, and I'm not getting your emails for some reason.
I checked spam also.
Yeah, we checked spam and everything. I don't know if they're not going out or they're stuck in drafts or what. You know, we don't have to do this in front of the whole class, but we're just,
Check it again and we do it.
okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Lori Siegel, you have your hand up. Did you have a question for me?
Yeah, Harold, I missed the session last night. I didn't look at my emails until really late. Is there somewhere it was recorded?
So if you email Jesse Katz is the go-to guy in the office for
Okay,
recordings and registration and things like that. I would just email him.
okay, great.
Email him and he will know. Jeffrey
Thank you.
Rogers, do you have a question?
Yes, did you in fact get my email?
With what was in it, Jeffrey?
I asked you to send me information. I never get any information from you, Harold.
Oh, Jeffrey, what is your email?
My email is Rogers,
Right.
ROGERS, 4520 at nyc.rr.com.
Rogers 4520 at nyc.rr.com.
That's
I've
it.
added everybody who's I will check it and I will see.
Thank you very much, Harold.
All right, I gotta go. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I just want to say it was recorded. I know somebody who saw it recorded last night. That's nice.
Hi, Raphael.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, everybody.
Yesterday was too much.
It was, yeah.
At least it
hard
ended.
day.
Yeah, it was up to the heights and down to the, below ground in one day. Yeah.
Kept wondering why the police weren't stopping them, why they weren't.
I know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why didn't somebody think about this, right?
If it was Black Lives Matters, they would have all.
Absolutely.
They would have all been.
What are you kidding me? Of course
gone.
they. This was deliberately done.
Deliberately
done.
Right.
Deliberately, you mean to let the police letting them run amok? Is that what you mean?
Of course.
Yes, the police allowed a lot more than they gave them much space.
Explain that. Why would the police?
Insane.
Like, why would the police do what Trump wants? I don't even understand that.
I think only 30 to 50 people were arrested.
Because it's
I
federal
know.
property and he's in charge.
Oh, well.
Cause say that again. He's in charge. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, he basically sent them there from
He did, of course
the
he
White
did.
House. He's like, go to the
Absolutely.
Capitol.
He planned this.
He definitely
I'm
planned
sure
it.
everybody remembers the Lafayette Park that they kept referring to yesterday when the peaceful protesters.
Yeah.
That wasn't done by the police. That was done by Barr and the administration, the Trump administration. I hate saying that word, but
yeah, let's not say
it. All deliberate. I mean, come on, don't be naive. This was deliberate.
These were his people.
These people
were
were
his
told to
people.
stand
No.
down. They
That
were
part I
told
understand.
to turn around.
But why didn't the police do anything? Why weren't the
road? They had all these battalions of troops of National Guard. They were right there. They were there. They were not.
They allowed it to happen. They helped allow it to happen.
Mike Pence is the one that called in the National Guard, not Trump.
That's right. Pence did, right.
They kept trying to force.
Yeah.
So they let them in. They didn't guard and called them in finally, not Trump.
Right.
Some of the videos, the police actually opened the door for them to walk in.
Oh.
Listen, when I was in that peaceful demonstration with Rabbi Kleinbaum, when we did Jews for Dreamers, and we all got arrested. There were 86 of us arrested in the Russell Senate Office Building, Rotunda. We were peacefully sitting there. There were way more cops and law enforcement taking it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd to even question it. Where were they? They were sitting on their asses because they were told to.
That's what's fascinating. I made myself watch some Fox News this morning. I couldn't not do it. And all of their, like for 15, 20 minutes, it was interviewing various conservative law enforcement related people and Homeland Security people with lots of like chin stroking about what could have gone wrong here. It's just baffling. Baffling.
All right, Jen, to wrap everyone. I have to close the room now.
Okay.
Early
Shabbat
Shabbat
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Tasha.
Have a nice day, guys.
Yes, let's have a boring day, like Rabbi said.
Bye.
Stay well.
Take a hot shower.
Yeah, that sounds good.